Welcome to the show, 10 Mentors Tuesday. Every Tuesday, one honest conversation about life in general and trying to figure it out as we go. I'm Dan, and before we begin, thank you for being here because the whole mission behind 10 Mentors is simple, really. Not everyone gets guidance, not everyone gets a mentor. So if we can create one thoughtful box for people to get started, then I think that matters most. I want to talk today about something I genuinely can't stop noticing once I started seeing it. And maybe you have experienced or come across it too, because once it clicks in your mind, you suddenly begin spotting this pattern everywhere. It's in politics, in celebrity culture, in business, in schools, offices, and churches, even sometimes inside families and friendship groups. There is this strange human tendency we seem to have where we protect people who produce value, even when there are serious concerns about their behaviour. And I call it the golden egg syndrome. It is that moment where people start protecting the person with power and money instead of protecting the people potentially being harmed around them. And when you really sit with that idea for a second, you start realizing how often society actually does this. We do it a lot, and I've done it myself more times than I can count. The famous actor or a great founder or the sales guy hitting huge targets or the athlete who keeps bringing home trophies for their country. And slowly people begin bending reality around them because nobody wants to damage the machine producing the golden eggs. Nobody wants to be the person who interrupts success, attention, money, or power. And to give you a bit of context and where I'm going with this story is probably to talk about one of the clearest examples of this, which was Jimmy Savile. Now, if you grew up in Britain, you remember how huge he was. He was everywhere. He was on television constantly, doing a lot of charity work, visiting hospitals, was famous, and influenced millions. He looked almost saint-like publicly. The kind of person institutions and people were proud to stand beside. Even the royal family members were friends with him. And then after his death, this horrifying reality that he raped and assaulted women started surfacing. Not one or two allegations, but we're talking about over 1,000 victims throughout his lifetime. Just think about that number for a second, because I don't think our brains even process numbers like that emotionally anymore. Over 1,000 human beings potentially affected, while one man continued moving through powerful institutions almost untouched. And he never got arrested for a single offence. Not one. And honestly, what disturbed me most was not just him, it was the silence around him. Because usually when something exists at that scale, there are warning signs everywhere. Rumours, stories, staff members uncomfortable, people whispering things privately but never publicly, people having strange feelings but talking themselves out of it. And eventually, society had to ask itself this terrifying question. Why did we dismiss the women who reported the abuse? And how many people saw fragments of the truth but chose not to confront it because he was too valuable, too famous, too connected, or simply too uncomfortable to challenge? Like the BBC, later faced criticism for serious failings and a culture where concerns were not properly addressed. Independent inquiries stopped short of calling it, I think, a formal, organised corporate cover-up. But honestly, I think the deeper issue is more human than corporate. Most silence does not happen because people are cartoon villains sitting in dark rooms planning evil things. I think it happens because ordinary people don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to lose their jobs, or they don't want conflict. They do not want to believe somebody they admired could actually be dangerous. And I think that is the uncomfortable part, because it forces us to admit this is not just about bad people. Sometimes it is about ordinary people avoiding difficult truths. And once you start noticing this pattern, you realise Jimmy Savile was not some completely isolated example either. We have seen versions of this happen again and again in different industries and different countries. Like, look at Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood. For years, there were rumours, stories, and warnings circulating quietly around the industry. People joked about it privately. Some people avoided being alone with him. Some actresses were warned by others behind closed doors. And yet, publicly, the machine kept moving because he was one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood. He could make careers, destroy careers, open doors, and very shrewdly close doors. And eventually what emerged was not just a story about one powerful man. It became a story about an entire culture where people were too frightened, too dependent, or too compromised to confront what was happening openly. And then you find out that the company's management team was complicit in this pattern of misconduct. They knew what was happening. They knew how pervasive it was. And not only did they fail to stop it, they enabled it and covered it up. So it's the same pattern as the BBC. And that's his legacy now. Not the Oscars or the amazing career or all the money. He was one of the coolest guys on the planet. He created some of the greatest movies, and look what he's come to. And people will remember him as a predator and not the genius he once was. And I find that sad and a stupid way to mark your life. That huge amount of work and creativity all destroyed because the lack of respect for women. And then you look at another guy, Jeffrey Epstein, and honestly, that case disturbs people globally because it exposes something even darker: wealth, influence, and powerful connections. Private jets, famous people, politicians, royalty, billionaires. And again, the question people keep asking was not just, how did one man do this? But how many people saw things they should have questioned earlier or turned their heads? Because when somebody becomes wealthy enough, connected enough, or useful enough, people often stop applying ordinary standards to them and they protect them instead. And I think that is what makes the golden egg syndrome so dangerous. It slowly teaches people that some individuals become too important to challenge, too valuable to question, too connected to confront. And once a society starts believing that, accountability begins collapsing in the background. And I imagine many people listening to this have probably experienced some smaller version of this in their own life. Maybe not on that horrifying scale, but in offices, workplaces, or social circles where everybody knew somebody was behaving badly, but nobody wanted to confront it because that person was important to the system. Like the high performer, or the top salesman, or the charismatic boss, the person everybody quietly protects because they are useful. Quiva told me about something she experienced years ago while working in Singapore, and honestly, when she told me the story, it stayed in my head for weeks afterwards. There was a sales guy in the office, sexually harassing female staff, and apparently even exposing himself openly in the workplace. She immediately raised concerns properly through the proper HR channels in the UK because she believed that was the right thing to do. And I think most people listening would probably assume that doing the right thing would lead to support or protection, but instead of the behaviour becoming the main focus, somehow she became the problem. She was told to put her head down and look the other way, and when she refused to do so, her contract was terminated immediately. Her friends and co-workers were told not to reach out to her, banishing her without a second thought. So the good person highlighting the issue became the uncomfortable disruption in the room. And so, once again, you see the pattern. The salesman was valuable. He produced revenue and shitted the golden egg. So instead of immediately protecting the people affected, the system instinctively protected the golden egg. And then we wonder why people can't speak up because of them facing serious repercussions that can damage their career trajectory and reputation and even their life for a very long time. And then another thing that fascinates me is how often people try to rebuild public trust through image rather than accountability. Like, you sometimes see these predators reinvent themselves completely after allegations or scandals emerge. Suddenly they become deeply spiritual, wearing crosses around their necks, apparently deeply religious, deeply enlightened, talking about redemption, healing, truth, faith, and transformation. And really, it's just an act. And look, genuine change is possible. Human beings absolutely can grow. People can become better than they once were. I believe that completely. But I also think society sometimes confuses performance of transformation with actual accountability. Somebody finding religion or spirituality does not automatically erase the harm they've done, and I think we need to be more aware of that. Public redemption arcs can become another form of image protection if there is never any real confrontation with behaviour, consequences, or truth underneath it all. And sometimes audiences want that redemption story because it allows everybody to emotionally move on without fully sitting with the uncomfortable reality of what happened or what society has become. And this is where I think humans struggle emotionally, because we want clean stories. We want heroes and villains. We want certainty. We want to believe talented people are good people. We want to believe success means character. But life keeps teaching us over and over again that those two things are completely separate categories. Some people are brilliant and deeply flawed. Some people are talented and manipulative. Some people can inspire millions publicly while damaging people privately. What worries me now is that social media has amplified this problem massively because visibility itself has become mistaken for virtue. Like, if millions follow somebody, we instinctively assume there must be something admirable about them. We almost outsource our judgment to popularity. But real character is much quieter than performance. Real character is how somebody treats people with less power than them. It is how they behave when there is no audience watching. It's whether success made them kinder or more entitled. And maybe the real challenge for all of us is this. The next time we instinctively rush to defend somebody powerful, famous, or valuable, maybe we pause for a second and ask ourselves honestly whether we are protecting the human being or protecting the golden egg they produce for our side, our company, our politics, or our entertainment. And this is something I want you to think about because it's true. Sometimes the bravest person in the room isn't the famous person everyone admires. Sometimes it is simply the ordinary person willing to risk comfort, reputation, or belonging to loudly say, "This is not okay." I think about Vicky Phelan when I think about that. Here was this ordinary woman who was given devastating news about her health in Ireland and then discovered that critical information connected to cervical screening failures had not been properly disclosed to her for years. Imagine that moment for a second. Imagine discovering that people around the system knew mistakes had happened, yet somehow the truth never fully reached the very people whose lives depended on it. And what made her remarkable was not fame or power, it was courage. She refused to disappear into the background and accept silence or hush money. She kept speaking out even while going through unimaginable pain, physically and emotionally. And because she spoke up, thousands of other Irish women began asking questions too. The entire country was forced to confront uncomfortable truths that many institutions probably wished had remained hidden or quietly managed behind closed doors. That is the opposite of the golden egg syndrome. That is somebody refusing to protect reputation over people, which I admire a lot. And maybe that is the deeper lesson in all of this. Systems don't usually change because powerful people suddenly become morally perfect. Systems change because ordinary people become brave enough to tell the truth publicly, even when it costs them something personally. And the strange thing is, society often praises courage afterwards while punishing it in the moment. While somebody is speaking up, they are often labelled difficult, emotional, disruptive, or dangerous to the institution. But years later, people look back and realise they were actually the person protecting everyone else. And these are the type of people we will talk about for decades after, the people who are changing the system and speaking up, not about the money and fame someone made. And I also think we should remember that the next time we see somebody standing alone trying to raise concerns about something uncomfortable, sometimes they are wrong, of course, but sometimes they are the only person in the room willing to say what everybody else is too frightened to admit. And guys, regarding where the lines are drawn and how to identify inappropriate behaviour or flirting, it's very simple. Would you invite a man into your office while you're naked for a business meeting? Or pull your penis out and play with it? No, you wouldn't. So this whole "I don't know what's acceptable anymore" thing is just nonsense. We know the difference. Harassment, assault, rape, victimising another person in any capacity is wrong, period. There is a fine line between just goofy, jerky behaviour and behaviour that really is abusive and must be called to account. The person coming forward gets punished. People don't trust the system enough or our culture enough to feel like if they went forward that they would be protected. And I get it and understand why, but know the golden egg syndrome, because you're not protecting a golden egg, you're protecting a rotten egg, one that can destroy a company and business over time. And maybe that is the real thing I want people to take away from this conversation today. Just be aware of the golden egg syndrome, because once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. In companies, in friendships, in politics, in celebrity culture, even sometimes inside ourselves. Just pause occasionally and ask yourself honestly, am I defending this person because it is truly fair and right, or am I defending them because they are useful to my world in some way? Because humans are very good at convincing themselves they are protecting something noble, when sometimes they are really protecting comfort, status, money, access, or belonging. Just don't lose your ability to question people simply because they are successful, charismatic, spiritual, talented, or powerful. Don't let somebody's golden eggs blind you to their behaviour. And maybe ask yourself one uncomfortable question from time to time. If this were an ordinary person with no fame, no money, no influence, and no status, would I still be defending this behaviour the same way? That should give you something to think about. Okay, thanks for spending this time with me on 10 Mentors Tuesday. I'm Dan. Borrow what helps and leave the rest. And I'll see you next Tuesday.